Story 1. I used to deal in whiteboard markers for high school teachers. One teacher tended to hoard them, leaving none for others, so I sometimes took markers from him and gave them to teachers in need. There was no formal payment, but I received occasional small favors. For example, being allowed to leave a classroom briefly. When a marker began squealing because it was nearly empty, teachers would nod at me as if to ask whether I had the goods, and I would give them the color they wanted, usually black. It was fun, and no one ever criticized me for taking markers. Story 2. I was in elementary school when Pogs were popular. Everyone had cool slammers, but I didn't have money for good ones. My dad made one for me from half-inch mild steel and used an engraving pen to create a simple pattern. Everyone asked where I got it. I didn't want to lose my advantage, but I also realized I could make money. My dad had a large sheet of the same half-inch steel. I told them I was the only one who could get them. I sold them for $15 each. My dad kept 10. I got 5. That's when I learned what overhead was. Edit. First silver. Neat, thanks. Story 3. I attended a private high school with a strict dress code that required ties and belts. I bought several ties and belts from a thrift store and ran a lucrative rental business out of my locker. Story 4. I used to crush warheads and mix them with sugar. I sold them in straws with the ends melted for 50 cents each. Story 5. I'm not sure this counts, but my brother and I used to charge people to beat all the challenges in GoldenEye 007 for the Nintendo 64 and gave them the cheat codes. The invincibility challenge was the toughest. Story 6. I used to sell Coca-Cola because they did not allow carbonated drinks to be brought in. Story 7. I had family in New York and visited a couple of times a year when I was in high school. Occasionally we went to Chinatown in New York City, and I would buy hundreds of dollars worth of fake watches, such as Rolex, Tag Heuer, Gucci, and others, then return to school and sell them for twice what I paid. Story 8. We hid Pokemon cards under playground equipment and traded them because the teachers would take them if they saw them. In class, we set up deals, creating a whole Pokemon card trading network. Story 9. My school used the metallic ends of pencils as currency. Bronze was the rarest, so it was the most valuable. Green was the most common, so it was the least valuable. We traded for erasers, pencil cases, or a spot in the Foursquare line. The system was eventually banned, but we continued to operate with people acting as banks to hide the currency and the transactions. Story 10. At my school, they took all the sweets out of the vending machines and replaced them with healthy snacks. In town, there was a sweet shop where I could buy a kilogram of mixed sweets for £5. Each week I bought 1 kilogram, bought £1 worth of small paper bags, and spent Sunday evening repackaging them for the week. On Monday, I brought the bags to school and sold them for 50 pence each. Story 11. Cuban sandwiches straight out of a duffel bag before school. They were bomb, cheap, and way better than the cafeteria lunch. Story 12. The only guy in the school whose family had proper television channels used to tape wrestling events and rent them out. Story 13. Apple laptops in middle school. Some had iTunes, some did not, and the kids wanted it. Apparently, I was the only one who knew how to transfer the installer using my Universal Serial Bus flash drive. I put it on everyone's laptop as gifts or favors. I got caught by the substitute teacher that day. I told her it was my flash drive and that I could do what I wanted with it. That is how I got the second detention of my life. Gifts were typical middle schooler stuff: UGIO cards, fruit snacks, and the best food trades at lunch. I gained in popularity and hung out with the cool kids. They were taking advantage of me, but I did not mind. Story 14. When I was in 6th grade, a teacher sold candy between classes at marked up prices. A student undercut her, which ended all candy sales. Story 15. Our teacher gave out little game coupons for winning class quiz games. When people were starting to get scanners and printers in their homes, some kid made copies of his coupons and sold or traded them to other students. When people asked what the coupons could be traded for, it was usually a piece of candy, a pencil with a fun print, or something similar. I think the kids were caught about 2 weeks into the scheme. Many people compare this to Diary of a Wimpy Kid, which I have heard of but never read. I think kids are just clever and do this kind of thing on their own, because many replies said similar things happened at other schools. I do not know if this is where the kid got his idea, and this may have been before those books came out. Story 16. I had the principal's secretary's handwriting down and used to sell hall passes for $1 each. I made a killing. I do not really know how much I made, but it was about $5 a day. Sometimes I went dry because you needed the actual pass paper, but I eventually figured out how to get into the supply closet by sliding the student identification by the latch bolt. I only took a few pads at a time so they would not get suspicious. I could also forge my mother's signature. I did it so well that when I brought in a note she had scribbled on the dashboard, they called her to confirm. Story 17. MPEG audio layer 3 files and compact disc recordable discs were just becoming available. A guy I knew made a lot of money on mixed CDs. Every week he circulated order forms on which customers selected the songs they wanted on the disc. The newest hits were listed at the top and changed weekly. The remainder of his library filled the rest of the form with a space for requests. He would deliver your disc the following week. He made a lot of money for a couple of years until everyone started getting their own songs from LimeWire or other file-sharing services. I do not know what he is doing now, 20 years later, but I do not doubt he is successful. As an aside, when this man started doing it in high school, the only real avenues for music sharing were Usenet groups and internet relay chat. Story 18. Nintendo games. Some kids sold them for $10 or $15 each. I did not know where he got them, but he said he told his father what he wanted and his father would get it for him. He asked for the same ones repeatedly. It did not matter. He ended up with 5 copies and sold 4 of them. Either the kid was the most spoiled brat in history, or his father was stealing them. I could never get any. I had a Sega, but I remember that kid making a killing in 3rd grade. Update. It was the Nintendo Entertainment System. Yes, please tell me how to download a car. Story 19. Slap bracelets were a hot commodity in a small southern town, with just a Walmart and 1 or 2 small clothing stores that carried them. Anyone who went out of town to shop or whose parents worked there would return with bracelets we could not get locally. So a small black market developed. Story 20. It's not anything bad, but we had a black market for food and another for birth control pills. Story 21. Danielle convinced my best friend and me, along with others, that she could permanently change the taste of our saliva, so it would taste like watermelon, cotton candy, or bubblegum. She made us wait a couple of days to decide a flavor and would ask, "Are you sure you always want everything you eat to have a hint of watermelon?" After a few days, once we picked a flavor, she charged us 50 cents or so. She made us chew on strange things like paper clips and erasers. Obviously, our saliva never changed, and she stopped. A couple of years later, I worked at Starbucks in my hometown. She came in and did not recognize me, and all I could think about was how she had made me chew on paper clips. Story 22. I would buy 6 packs of soda for $1.79 and resell them for a total of $3. Story 23. 2 years ago, I was a sophomore in high school. Freshmen were not allowed to go off campus, but everyone else was. I would take orders, go to the local fast food shops, pick up the food, and add about $2 to the price. I ended up making about $200 a month. Note, $200 a month, not per year. Story 24. The swim team was selling fundraiser lollipops that were insanely popular. I found the website on the wrapper and discovered I could buy them much cheaper and select only the popular flavors. I stocked the best flavors and undercut the fundraisers by 25 cents, still making over 100% profit. I quickly became a top seller and made a lot of money until copycats started appearing. Story 25. My school was an extremely conservative Christian boarding school. Forbidden items included jeans for girls, shorts for everyone, candy, any food in the dorms, cell phones, gaming systems, television, movies, playing non-Christian songs on musical instruments, and clothing from popular brands such as Abercrombie & Fitch and Hollister. A few students began selling food, candy, and clothing from those brands. I did not understand why people bought these items from them, but the sellers made large amounts of money. Many students were the children of wealthy doctors, so there was plenty of money to spend. One student sold a box of Altoids for $15. In short, my high school was so strict that a black market developed where people paid ridiculous amounts for food and snacks. Story 26. Banana chips cost 25 cents in the vending machine at my middle school. I went to school early, so I bought them all and sold them for 50 cents a bag. Story 27. I know students at my school sold marijuana and pills and were arrested. About 20 students were expelled. Story 28. Our school didn't have candy, so I started buying huge bags of pixie sticks and sold them for 25 cents each. Then I got caught. This was middle school, so drugs were not involved. Story 29. I lived in an area with many retirees, many of whom were raising their grandchildren. Because they did not trust online marketplaces such as eBay and Amazon, I began ordering items from those sites for them and charged an additional fee for my service. The service was eventually shut down after I bought someone a universal serial bus flash drive shaped like a pistol. Although it was clearly a universal serial bus flash drive, the school principal involved the police in an attempt to get me in trouble. Story 30. Some kids made a habit of stealing chalk when the teachers were not looking. After a while, they started selling it and charged more for longer, fresher sticks. It ended when someone snitched on a buyer, which set off a chain of retaliatory snitching. Many pockets were emptied, some with chalk, but most of the dealers had hidden theirs and got away with it. Story 31. Duct tape wallets were popular. Every year there was a new kid making them, laughing out loud. Story 32. I was a Pokemon card smuggler. In 6th grade, my friend's dad overheard my friend and me talking about how much our Pokemon cards were worth. He was shocked to learn some were worth $10 to $20 apiece. He said, "Shame they won't be worth that much when you go to sell them." That comment stuck with me, and a few days later I started selling my cards at school. I made a list of everything I had with prices next to each item. I passed the list around during class, and kids met me between classes to buy what they wanted. I was making a lot of money for a middle schooler, and before long parents complained that their kids were skipping lunch because they were spending their lunch money on Pokemon cards. So the school banned them. I still had a good amount of inventory to move. I did all kinds of things to avoid getting caught. I hid cards in a box of crayons, put a few card sleeves in the middle of a binder full of legitimate notes, and even hollowed out an old textbook to hide all my cards. Despite being searched 3 to 5 times over the next few weeks, my cards were never found, and I sold all of them before Christmas break. I ended up making close to $800 and was able to buy Christmas gifts for my entire immediate and extended family with my own money for the first time. Once the other kids learned how much I had made, they were blown away and suddenly everyone was selling their cards. The problem was no one was buying them anymore. In short, I started a one-kid Pokemon card black market, smuggled cards into school, and got out of the game right before the bubble burst. Story 33. During elementary school in the 1980s, many candies were not individually wrapped for resale in stores, like Warheads. I bought bulk packs of candy. It did not matter what kind, although atomic fireballs were my cash cow. I individually packed them, sometimes 2 per pack depending on the candy. I used small zip-top bags often seen used for drugs. Because I spent time around adults with few scruples, I was able to get those in bulk from a local head shop called High on the Hill. It was a surreal time in retrospect. I was the only supplier for a full year in 4th grade. I made a lot of money for a 10-year-old. I would make $100 a week just from atomic fireballs. The bulk jugs cost about $5 or $6 each at wholesale, and at a quarter apiece it worked out to about $60 profit per jug, if I recall. Luckily, school came easy to me because running the business was a full-time job. Keeping stock, packaging product, counting change, budgeting, keeping a bank register, my mother opened a separate account that I used for my money, and avoiding authority. It was turbulent because I never really had a group of friends as a kid, but in 4th grade I was the man. Going from having no real friends, being picked on or ignored, to becoming the center of attention was surreal. Even then I recognized what was happening. Their smiles were fake. Their interest was not in me, but in what was in my bag that day. Girls were not saying hello out of politeness or genuine interest. They were just waiting their turn. My denim bag got more attention than I could have imagined. I had laid the groundwork and provided the blueprint. When 5th grade started, there was competition, but they were weak. They always sold out or only bought enough to make a small profit, largely selling lollipops or prepackaged items like Hershey's Kisses, Bit-O Honey, or Tootsie Rolls, whatever they could grab at the store before school. It was amateur hour. They had made a mockery of something I took seriously as a 10 or 11-year-old can take something. I closed up shop shortly after the school year began. The fast life and quick money were over. The excitement was gone and the smiles were smaller. Kids came to me only as a last resort after buying from the popular kids. It was like flipping a switch. On my first day without the bag, a few kids asked if I was selling, but once word got around that I was out of the game, everything went back to normal. No friends, no conversation, no one to sit with at lunch or on the bus. It was the first time I really witnessed disingenuous behavior. I had always been authentic, and after it was all over, I was happy to stay that way. I have never really put this time into words before. As it turns out, I learned a lot of life lessons in 4th grade. In short, I peaked in 4th grade. Story 34. Blow pops from Sam's Club, 25 cents each. Must have made a killing as a 5th grader. Story 35. Pencil fighting. One person held their pencil by both ends. The other tried to break it by holding one end of their own pencil, pulling the other end back, and snapping it down on the first pencil. Story 36. We made a website that started with prank phone calls and stunts. It turned into a homework sharing site with answers to tests and quizzes that people later stole. Luckily, I wasn't involved by that time, but my friends weren't involved in graduation. Story 37. Marbles were huge at my primary school. It reached the point where they were only allowed for 3 months a year because we would talk about nothing else except the games and the marbles we wanted to buy. That was marble season. You could buy a big bag of cat's eyes from the supermarket, but those wouldn't get you far. To play the high-stakes games, you needed a speckled egg, a glitter bomb, a tidal wave, or something exotic, and those were expensive. We, poor kids, couldn't afford them, so we secretly gambled our marbles throughout the year. When marble season opened, we had amassed enough marbles to be ahead of the game. Being caught with marbles outside of marble season was harsh. One kid received 5 strokes of the cane. Because of that, we hid in the shadows of the trees and slung those little glass balls around. Not only did it hone your skills for the start of the season, it taught you to take the shot and then act nonchalant. Marbles were currency. You could trade them for lunches or buy time on playground equipment. There was a good reason they banned marbles at my school. We turned it into something like a mafia. Story 38. Oh, I have one. The man who founded and operated the Silk Road, and who was later imprisoned for it, attended my high school about a year or two before me. Story 39. There was a girl who sold candy bars at my school. Her mother bought the large packs at Sam's Club. She asked me to help, and that is when the business started booming. We were making $50 to $100 a day just hustling in the hallways and the gym. Unfortunately, she was caught and they shut us down. Story 40. I used to run a professional wrestling merchandise hustle when I was in middle school. I was obsessed. I sold figurines at incredibly marked up prices and used the proceeds to buy wrestling digital versatile discs. Story 41. They removed the pop machines at my high school, so I started selling pop for my backpack for $1 a can. Story 42. My mom won a year's supply of double-stuffed Oreos. I sold them in Ziploc bags while in 4th grade to everyone I could, even teachers. My mom thought my friends were eating them all. Story 43. My best friend and I sold packs of gum in middle school. We made about $30 a day, and the teachers were going crazy trying to find where all the gum was coming from. As model students, they never suspected us. Story 44. An Asian student would walk around school with a few live pet fish in their school bag and sell them. Story 45. Pop rocks in the late 1970s. A kid drove 40 miles from Alabama to a Catholic school in Georgia, bought them in Alabama, and doubled the price in Georgia. Sister Charles broke up the ring before we could find out whether drinking Coke and eating Pop Rocks would blow up your stomach. Story 46. My grandfather taught me how to crack the protection on digital video discs and burn them onto blank discs. I would buy 100 packs of blank discs for $20 to $30 and sell the movies for $5 each. I thought it was going to end when someone mentioned it to a teacher. Turned out he wanted movies too. Story 47. In my primary school, we had some students with disabilities who used special crayons that wrote very well. Some children would steal them and trade them for Pokemon cards and toys. Story 48. I was the snack plug in my freshman year. I sold Little Debbie snacks and bottles of soda. I put another kid out of business, and he threatened to kill me at lunch. I told him he would be doing me a favor. Story 49. There's a town butcher who has the best beef jerky I've ever tasted. His son used to bring packs of jerky in his high school bag and sell them to other kids. Story 50. Pink eye $5. In middle school, you could come to school with pink eye and make a lot of money from students who wanted to miss a test. A student would stick a finger in their own eye and then in yours. Story 51. Some Hispanic students at my school brought a bunch of Mexican snacks to class and sold them cheaply. The mango lollipops with chili powder were fantastic. I had a side hustle. My friend had moved away from my state but came to visit from New Orleans. It was Mardi Gras and she had a trunk full of beads. She gave me a bucket of them because she had too many. I marketed them at school as authentic beads from the real Mardi Gras, and students paid 50 cents for one. I should have majored in business instead of becoming an art student. Story 52. A friend of mine made glass candy with her mom in many flavors. It was incredible. She sold it for 50 cents a bag and made a killing for a while. She made the mistake of bringing in a Jack Daniel's flavored batch, and a goody two-shoes reported her to the office, claiming she was selling booze. Story 53. In grade 2, we had a snowball store. You would trade cool snowballs there. Story 54. In high school, drugs and illegal weapons. In elementary school, sticks and other random items they found. Story 55. I ran it. For a few years in elementary school, books were banned in the classroom. Not specific titles, but books in general. They were considered too distracting, even though most kids read when they finished their work. I started smuggling books to school and lending them to other kids. It began innocently. I had loads of Hank the Cowdog books that I loved. I hid them in my desk and loaned them to close friends. Soon the entire class knew, and the rumor spread through the school. I became a full-time book smuggler. I had a system, a 2-week borrowing limit, a log of who borrowed which book and when, and a small library for myself. I made sure the books were treated fairly. If anything was returned damaged, the borrower was banned from borrowing. I kept it up until middle school, which was considerably less restrictive. Thank you for the awards. I'm about to log off, but I'm glad some people got a genuine smile from this. It's probably the most interesting thing I've ever done, and this made my whole day. I hope everyone has a lovely day. Story 56. I was the dirty magazine dealer when I was in middle school in the 1980s. First, I found my parents' stash of pornographic magazines. Boxes were stashed everywhere. In the basement by the washing machine and under the Civil War swords. In the guest bedroom under the bed at least 50. In a standing cabinet in the kitchen. In cabinets near the ceiling. All over their bedroom, under the china. The house was full of them. I went through my parents' bedroom. There were hundreds of pornographic magazines in the house, and I was 11. Only God and my parents knew what was in there, and I had to find out. After I grew bored with some, I started selling them to other kids for $20 each in 1984. The market for explicit magazines was booming among adolescents. I had a customer base and needed more. I would go into a bookstore and ask for the most esoteric book I could imagine. The clerk would go check the back, and I would stuff all the Penthouse and Playboy magazines in my bag and leave quickly. Sometimes I took a comic book as well. Many years later, I returned to my hometown and went to that bookstore. I wanted to apologize and try to make up for it somehow. It was gone. Sorry about that, Walden Books. We were boys and you had boobs. Story 57. My friends and I ran a pencil business. We stole and sold pencils to everyone until some of the kids in our group snitched, so we had to operate outside of school. Story 58. Spork. I am not sure it really qualified as a black market, but many teachers banned it and each spork cost $5. The idea was that each player had a target and had to spork that person by stabbing or poking them while the target was not holding their spork. The eliminator then inherited the eliminated player's target. In the final weeks, it became a free-for-all and anyone could be eliminated. At the end, a portion of the total buy-in was distributed to everyone still in the game. Story 59. We had a pizza dealer who would take orders and cash from other students for the first few periods, then pick up the delivery in the parking lot at the start of lunch. He was pretty chill. Story 60. Back in second grade, all the boys traded Lego minifigures, specifically Star Wars. Story 61. I knew a guy who sold cookies, really good ones. A policy prevented students from running small businesses at school, supposedly to combat drug sales. It did not help. He had to start selling cookies furtively to keep going. The police were called and confiscated his containers of cookies. He kept selling for a year after that. We have since graduated. Story 62. Salt packets. We were hit hard by the Michelle Obama salt recession, and the enterprising children were quick to buy restaurant salt packets in bulk and redistribute them under the table. $1 would get you enough salt for a whole week of microwave pizzas. Story 63. My little brother says his version of the black market in school is drugs. I said no. That is the actual black market. Story 64. 3 friends and I, all Asian, sold Asian jelly straws, caramel apple pops, and Mexican lollipops covered in tagine in middle school. The jelly straws were unfamiliar to many non-Asian kids, but they loved them when they discovered them. Each straw cost 25 cents or 5 for $1. The pop sold for 75 cents to $1 depending on demand. We each kept a jar of jelly straws in our locker, a bag of pops, and a small box of quarters in cash. Every period we restocked our backpacks and sold while walking to and from class and during class. As middle schoolers, $20 a day, split between 4 of us, $5 each, felt like earning a 6-figure salary as an adult. Life was great until one day my friend's locker was broken into. Someone had watched him enter his locker combination and came back later. They took all the snacks, about $100 in cash, and everything else in the locker. School eventually banned the jelly straws but not the pops. The large Latin community still brought their own to eat as snacks, and students caught reselling snacks were suspended. We ended up making roughly $2,000 from our classmates and still got to eat the straws at home. Now I work more than 40 hours a week to pay rent and eat fast food. Growing up sucks. Story 65. All of that animated pornography, Pokemon cards, bubble gum, and cannabis. Story 66. In 6th grade, I convinced my father to lend me $100 so I could buy a large order of silicone bracelets similar to Livestrong bracelets that said Napoleon and Pedro to sell at school. Other kids copied the idea with better phrases, and that was when an underground bracelet market started at my school. Shortly afterward, the school banned sales, and I still owed my father about $80. Story 67. We created an entire black market currency and economy based on rocks. I used to manage one of 3 mining operations running concurrently on the elementary school playground in the mid to late 1990s. The school was in a small town in southeast Tennessee, rural and bordered by the Cherokee National Forest. The shinier or smoother the rock, the more valuable it was. Rocks were traded between kids and peers for snacks, drinks, homework bribes, and even protection from bullies. Whoever controlled the rocks controlled the playground. My operation had the largest kids. We used the biggest boulders, chipping them into rounded points to break larger rocks down to manageable sizes for a bunch of little kids, and we had the most hands with sticks and straight-edged rocks for digging and moving dirt. At the end of a day of work, we would place a huge rock on top of our mining hole, too big for most people to lift except for a select few who all worked for me. Any of the 4th, 5th, or 6th graders could probably have lifted it at the time had they cared to. 2 other operations existed. One was made up entirely of girls. Their rock output was shabby at best. The other group worked inside the dome-shaped jungle gym, which offered the best protection from intruders and thieves and obstructed the teacher's line of sight. As manager, I walked the edge of the playground looking for strong sticks and perfect digging rocks, because tool durability required a steady supply of unbroken implements. When classes had recess at different times, a lot of thievery and sabotage would happen. Rocks would get stolen and mining holes would be filled with trash and debris. I recently visited the old school, which closed in the mid-2000s and is now abandoned and in disrepair. The hole, though, is still there. All this time has not erased the impact my class and others had on that playground. That's about all I can remember. But I still have my personal collection of rocks from that playground that I took home bit by bit over many years in elementary school. A box full of stupidity and imagination. Story 68. Silly bands were sold and eventually banned in elementary schools. Story 69. In college, our dorm resident assistants ran a program where residents they considered model citizens received small printed pieces of fake money on different colors of heavy paper. You could redeem them at the front desk for items that required a rental fee, such as pots and pans and video games. We discovered the campus bookstore sold the same paper, and with a little time in Photoshop we were able to mass-produce the coupons. Each coupon had a face value of $1 but cost about 3 cents to make. We did not get caught, but the resident assistants discontinued the program after a big event to collect coupons when they discovered more than 650 additional coupons in circulation. In our defense, we were bored. Story 70. It was not the black market. Rather, porn compact discs and cannabis were in circulation in my school. Story 71. Pornography had been trending. The principal instructed all physical education teachers to search all students' bags for USB flash drives. They manually checked the bags and contacted the students' parents. Pornography is illegal in our country, and the situation resembled a black market. If you were caught, it was over. If not, you were extremely lucky. Story 72. I ran a black market sour gumball operation in 5th grade. We bought them in bulk, sold them for 5 cents each, and made about $12 profit per bag. We operated just off the school property line at the edge of the field, so it seemed legitimate. One member of our group was eager and had a principal for a father and a teacher for a mother. He cracked under questioning by staff and told on us. Even though we were not breaking school rules and were not on school property, I feigned illness the next day and let the situation blow over. I had hustling in my blood from a young age. Story 73. Lemon Heads, Johnny Apple Treats, Jolly Rancher Sticks, Red Hots, and similar candies. Most cost 10 cents at the store, and I charged 25 cents. I only made about $5 a week, but this was the 1980s. We also had a huge marble scene during recess with lots of trading and purchases. Everyone was convinced dough baby marbles, clay marbles, were worth a lot more than other marbles. In the 1980s, many of the old World War II-era clay marbles had ended up in grandchildren's collections. The kids were not wrong. There simply were not that many actual dough babies around in school. I had one real one. I found a pharmacy in the next town that sold bags of ceramic marbles that looked and felt like clay. I did not flood the market exactly, but I did get plenty of free candy and soda after school, as well as my pick of the best marbles on the playground. Story 74. Gas masks. I live in Kharkiv, Ukraine, near a forest with an abandoned military base. When I was in school, there was nothing inside except old calendars on the walls and gas masks, almost new and in good condition with bags and some filters. One time a group of brave kids went there and brought some masks to school. Everyone asked them for more, so they began going there regularly to collect masks and sell them at school. This continued until the military returned to the base. That was about 10 years ago, and I still have my mask. Note: the base has been abandoned since the early to mid-1990s. Story 75. My mom was a teacher at the school I attended. She would confiscate finger skateboards and finger bikes we played with and traded. After school, I would take them from my mom's desk and sell them back to the other kids. Story 76. During recess, we played poker in places where there were no teachers or adults. The stakes were huge amounts of candy. Story 77. I sold candy out of my locker in 7th grade and pens in 4th grade until the man stepped on my neck and shut me down in the 70s. Story 78. Salt. I ran it. I was one of the few kids who brought my own lunch to school because we could not afford school lunches and my mom was too proud to sign up for reduced price lunch. Given the state of the cafeteria food, I did not mind. One time I brought some hard-boiled eggs to school, probably right after Easter. Of course I brought salt to put on them, but I brought far too much because what sixth grader knows how much salt she will need? A couple of friends asked for some of my salt because the cafeteria soup was so bland, and I shared. That drew the wrath of the teachers because we were supposedly destroying the delicate nutritional balance of the bland soup, and salt was banned from the cafeteria. Since I was bringing my own lunches, I found ways to sneak salt in. Eventually, I had a whole black market for salt, as if this were first-century Rome. Salt packets from fast food places were especially convenient, but you had to hide the evidence. I hated that school. It was a relief to transfer to a new charter school the next year. I was no longer constantly in trouble or getting bullied, and I actually learned things. Story 79. When I was in high school, Jamie Oliver's television show came to make our menu healthier. As a result, salt and sugar packets became highly sought after. Story 80. I sold a few things in school. One of the best was Mardi Gras necklaces when I was in 10th grade. I found a box of them in a closet at home and brought them to school. I sold each for 50 cents to $1 and made $130 over 2 weeks before I ran out of them. Story 81. At university, I sold alcohol to high school students. My university was in a town that had 3 high schools, so on weekends you would often see high school students milling around. One day, a high school student asked me for a beer and paid the equivalent of $2. I had paid about $7 for the case. I asked if he wanted more, and that is how my business started. It is worth noting that these buyers were about 16 years old. I sold at 3, sometimes 4 times the retail price. I did this for 2 years and made about an extra $300 a month. I stopped because I left university. Summary. I sold alcohol to high school students for 4 times the original price. Story 82. Cannabis, edibles, vapes, painkillers, alcohol, and items from the girls' locker room were being sold under the bleachers of the soccer field. I know this because I was helping pick up trash, and we found a bra next to cannabis brownies and a dollar bill. Story 83. I remember an intense acorn market rivalry among the Chads in kindergarten. In middle school, people sold essays and math homework answers. In high school, the typical items were weed, cigarettes, and sandwiches from the nearby Chick-fil-A. Story 84. I used to draw characters on erasers and sold them for $5 each. My friend and I were gaining traction, and I started a catalog of characters to choose from. We made a little over $100 until we finally got busted. This was in 5th grade. Story 85. My brother was assigned office duty. $5 to remove an absence. $20 or more to change a grade. He made a killing until a girl reported him after he would not help her. They wanted to expel him, but it was worked out that he would be tutored in the library for the last 2 months before graduation, and he could not walk. He did not care. The girl, well, let's just say she got hers from a few girls who were not happy. She only spent a few days in the hospital. The school protected everything with 3 passwords, and office duty and study halls were eliminated. Still to this day, if someone meets me and asks whether I am his brother, they say how he saved so many people. In our district, 7 absences in a marking period meant failing grades in all classes. Story 86. A student at my school had a passion fruit tree and brought the fruit to sell. When he started dating my best friend, I got access to the fruit. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.